Good evening and welcome to Sports Federation TV, the show where we chat about a range of different codes of sport brought to you by the Western Cape Provincial Sport Confederation. My name is Alton Davids. I'll be your host. We have an exciting lineup. We'll start with Dr. Debbie Alexander. How are you, Debbie?
I'm good, thank you, Alton. Thank you very much for allowing us to discuss this topic of safeguarding in sport. Really critical for us going forward. It's a subject that's been neglected for a while. It's kind of in the back of people's minds, and we really appreciate this opportunity to bring it to the forefront. So thank you very much for that.
You're most welcome. Mr. Norman Brooks, it's been a while. Are you all good?
I'm good, yes, indeed.
Good, good. Debbie's highlighted the safeguarding aspect. Tell us how did it come about? What's it about?
Well, we all have a duty of care to safeguard children and vulnerable adults in sport. And increasingly internationally, there's been concerns about the number of cases of young people or vulnerable adults being subject to various types of abuse. And quite recently, in the last couple of years, there's been a huge case in the United States where a doctor who was the doctor for the United States Gymnastics Federation was in court charged with over 300 cases of child abuse, of child sexual abuse, right? Massive. And this has really highlighted the need globally for us to address this issue. And it's been taken up by the International Olympic Committee, who've got a position statement and a toolkit on safeguarding in sport. And they are asking all their member international federations and national Olympic committees to address this issue. It's also been taken up by the ministers of sport because in Kazakhstan, the meeting of the ministers of sport that was sponsored by UNESCO and interestingly was chaired by the South African Minister of Sport or Deputy Minister of Sport at the time. They came up with an action plan, and in that action plan, safeguarding has also been identified as an important issue for sport.
So where are we in the big space of all of this now, Debbie? I mean, Norman sketched the background. Where are we currently from a SASCOC perspective and from a national perspective?
So in May this year, Norman actually hosted a safeguarding conference in Johannesburg, and many of the federations were invited to attend. Sadly, not the numbers we would have liked. And at that conference, we had representatives from UNESCO, from Safe Sport International, the IOC, the IPC, the Commonwealth Games, and really these organizations putting forward their, the policies and procedures they have in place. And then we also had input from the various international federations. And at that conference, we also we had survivors of abuse speak about their experiences and the impact it's had on their lives. And I also presented in terms of safeguarding and the impact on mental health of athletes. So it was an important conference, and at that conference we discovered that we actually don't have the policy in place at SASCOC, and that many of our federations do not have the policy in place, although I know that there are some international federations that had already started on that process because of their IOC mandate. So at that meeting, I actually took it upon myself to say, okay, I'm going to drive this because we need to have it. It's a legal requirement, and we are failing our athletes dismally. So at that meeting, Norman, Anne and Clint, myself decided we're going to put this policy in place, and we've done that over many months. It's gone from ourselves backwards and forwards. It's gone to legal, it's gone to the board, to the High Performance Commission, the Women's Commission, a number of national federations, and members of the medical committee. So everyone's given their input, and we're just about ready to rock and roll with it, just awaiting some input from legal. Then we'll finalize it, and really our aim was to have it adopted at the SASCOC AGM on the 23rd of this month. So it really is short notice, but we're determined to get it through because it really is very, very important for us in terms of our athletes' health and well-being.
Definitely. I mean, does that tie in with the whole coaching license of getting a police clearance, all of those kinds of things? Is that part of the entire package?
Yes, yes, and maybe Norman, you want to just chat
Well,
about the
yeah,
acts.
I think that's just one aspect. There are many aspects,
Yeah.
but certainly the vetting of coaches is important, right? And actually is a legal requirement in South Africa. It's very interesting. The Council of Educators just recently released a report on schools, and they identified that sport and sports coaching are two gateways for abusers to actually get access to children.
Absolutely.
And increasingly so in South Africa. So the vetting is very important. In fact, under the South African law, sports clubs, sports organisations are defined as employers, and volunteers in sports clubs are defined as employees. And if you don't go through the vetting procedure, you could face a major fine or up to 7 years in jail.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's imperative, you know, not just from a moral perspective, because we all have this duty to look after young people,
Yeah.
but it's imperative from a legal perspective as well.
Definitely, and as a coach, and you're coaching young ladies, there needs to be a woman next to you, or in the vicinity. I mean, there's all kinds of issues, not just you funding them, but there's things like menstrual cycles that you need to be equipped to be able to deal with a young lady at that level. You know, so it's all of those kinds of things that need to be, I'm trusting is part of this entire package.
Yeah. One of the rules in safeguarding is the rule of two. There should always be two adults present. No adult should ever be
Perfect.
alone with a child,
Perfect.
right? And if the coach is not the same gender as the performer, then there should be someone of that opposite gender there as well. You know.
Perfect.
So some very basic, simple rules around best practice in sport, which protect children from potential abuse. And these are the things that we'd like to see sports federations and sports clubs adopting.
Definitely. Debbie, in closing, before we bring Clint and Anne on?
Well, I would, you know, most of the national federations have now had access to this policy, and I really would encourage them, if they haven't, those that haven't, to in fact go and scrutinize the policy and think clearly about the decision that they need to take on the 23rd of November. And I really would ask them for their support to adopt this policy at the SASCOC AGM.
Where would we find that policy? Is it open to Joe public to have a look at yet or not?
Well, you could have a look at it, but it's if you belong to a federation, it will be with your
the
federation, because it
Okay.
has been sent out to all members for
Okay.
their input.
Norman, closing comments from you?
No, I think globally this is becoming a huge issue. South Africa is, you know, slightly behind in this issue. There are only a few federations in South Africa that have got really robust safeguarding policies and measures in place at the moment, and there's a need for other people to catch up quickly. And they need to do that because there's potential risk to them if they don't.
Absolutely.
Reputational, financial, etc. type risk to them. So it's a very important matter for them to address.
And the athletes are our prime focus,
Absolutely.
more than anything else.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Debbie. Thank you, Norman.
Thank you.
Let's take a break. We'll bring on Clint and Anne.